John, this is so great. I am such a fan of what you have done for all these years and a continued fan in what you continue to do. An American rock legend. To have you here with us at the Artist Series. I'm in New York. You're in Nashville. How are you?
You know, under the circumstances, pretty darn good. I know it's a tough time for the world, and I've just been trying to make the best of being home. I think this is probably the longest period of time that I've actually been home in my entire professional career. Wake up one morning and I said, "Is this what retirement's like?" Maybe it's kind of a preview, but I'm not exactly one to stop. So I tend to find lots of things to do, like talk to you and write songs and a bunch of other good stuff. So,
John, listen, I understand you have not been home this much of a time, but there really is no retiring. It's about reinventing. That's really the R word we want to use here.
Good way of putting it. It is. It's a new world and a new future, a new reality. I think that what's going on now will affect and color how we go forward. In a way, it's great that it's helped me embrace social media and the tools of Instagram and YouTube to further our connection. So for me, it's been kind of educational and something I guess I needed to do.
But that's very interesting. You talk about social media. Social media is about relationship cultivation. So now that we have this gift of time on our hands, what are you doing with that? Are you getting more involved, like I said, with Instagram and or Facebook?
Yeah, very much so. My wife and I are both, we have never been really that invested in social media. We have our various sites and we do our, things. But over this past period, a few weeks, we've realized that it's an invaluable way of connecting and staying connected. It's an invaluable way of communicating. We've really embraced it in a big way, and we're going to take it even further. So doing interviews like this with you is just a step in that direction. And we have other things we're going to be doing. I began to record some acoustic stuff from my wife's she shed downstairs in the basement. So we're calling it the she shed sessions. It's not easy to say. Say that 3 times fast. And I'll be doing some acoustic performances from there and working on another site where I'm going to be talking about my other passion, which is cars and racing and stuff like that. So, so it's really been a chance to spread my social media wings, so to speak.
Well, John, this is very exciting. And what we do at the Sessions panel on YouTube, and of course now the Artist Series at a distance, what this is about pushing it out to the world. We've got all the social media, platforms going on. We've got the YouTube, we've got everything happening. It's really a bit overwhelming at a point, but just tell me, what are you doing in the she shed?
In the she shed sessions?
Yes.
Well, what happened was I was getting requests by various organizations. Music City Roots here in Nashville, which has been a musical home for me ever since I came to Nashville. Other situations have come up where people have said, "Will you mind doing an acoustic song?" And of course, the first thing we did, my wife got the iPhone out. I sat there and played a song, and I said, "Oh, this is cool." Then I began to see what other people are doing, and I realized there's an entire technique to it. There's microphones, there's lighting, there's also... So we came up with an idea to go down into the basement, which is very vibey and cool looking. I set up a really high quality mic, began to work on the sound, and eventually we did a 30-minute set of acoustic songs, and which turned out really well. And that was the impetus to start the She Shed sessions. And so that was just really the first step. And I think we'll just take that to probably a whole other level as well. I always enjoy playing solo acoustic, so it's a real chance for me to do that sort of thing.
Part of that comes down to probably just practicing and just working on the skills of the acoustic. So you're really kind of pushing yourself forward on your instrument.
Well, I really think of myself as an acoustic guitar player who plays electric guitar. I do both, obviously, but for the past couple of years, I have a band in Nashville called the Good Road Band, and we tour all over the place. I do a lot of acoustic playing. So my acoustic chops are pretty well developed at this point. And so for me to sit there and play a song on acoustic guitar and, in a singer-songwriter setting is very comfortable for me. And it gives me a chance to go back to my musical roots prior to Hall & Oates, where I was playing Delta blues and folk music and bluegrass. Bring that aspect of my musical personality to the front.
Boy, which is exciting. You're allowing yourself to kind of go back And really, we go back to Reinventing. You're pulling from that to bring out a whole new John Oates to the world. Really, this is what's happening.
It's really what I've been doing ever since I moved to Nashville, getting embraced by the Americana community, the amazing musicians who have become friends and partners in making music together. This has been a real, as you said, I've gone back to go forward. I've gone back to my earliest musical influences, but then reimagined through the prism of who I am today with the experience I have and the experiences, not only musically, but personally. So then I'm bringing that now to using that as a jumping off point. I did an album about 2 years ago called Arkansas. And that was a exploration of early American pop music. And what I mean by that is, I wanted to just shine a light on the fact that there was pop music before rock and roll. And that maybe a lot of the younger generation may not realize it, but
right.
What makes a pop record? Or what makes a hit record? Let's put it that way. Can you hear it on the radio? Can you play it on a record? And do a lot of people like it? That's my definition. It might be a crackpot definition, but I don't care.
It's very clear, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So I said, well, okay. I said, I've been a pop musician my whole life. I don't even know what the first hit record was. And I went, okay, hold on a second. There's something going on here. So I went back and did some research, found some records in the early 1920s that sold 1 million copies. And I went, wait a minute. This is a whole new thing. So I began to explore that, and I began to incorporate that into this album I was making. So the album became kind of a snapshot of this music that was, for the first time, people were able to take music home, listen to it on a phonograph. I said, this is a revolutionary concept for the teens in the 1920s. We take it for granted, of course. For us, music is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And but the very fact that you couldn't hear music unless someone performed it, you went to see them perform it, or someone sat in the house with an instrument, a piano or a guitar, and played it. So now, all of a sudden, people were able to enjoy music at home in a completely different setting. I mean, it's totally revolutionary. And I don't think, a lot of people just maybe take that for granted. So I began to look into some of those songs. And it really opened my eyes to a lot of interesting musical pathways.
Boy, John, what great research. I mean, when you think about going back to the early 1900s when talkies had just entered the scene and Al Jolson's The Jazz Singer came out, which was the first musical sound what they heard, that really opened up a whole new world of what music was happening and to hear the sounds. Right. So here you are going back to those roots and pulling, listen, this is what I love about what you do, John. You really just keep going and you just keep on researching. Fantastic.
Well, I'm a history buff. I love history. I read nonfiction, and history is one of my go-to things for reading. And without sounding like a cliche, if you don't understand where you came from, you'll never know where you are. I think it's a very important thing to remember. It's important, and both musically and personally. That's an important thing. Interestingly enough, on the day I was born, April 7th, 1948, Al Jolson had a #1 record. How about that? And on that same day, CBS released the first long-playing album. So somehow or another, my life has been in sync with this kind of musical evolution, pre-rock and roll. Because when I was born, I'm old enough to remember music before rock and roll. Yeah. My parents loved big band music, and that's all they listened to. Yeah. So when I was a little kid, and because I was musically inclined, I guess I was more sensitive to picking up on it. Big band music and Martin Block's Make-Believe Ballroom on the radio station in New York City was like, that was the music I heard. And then all of a sudden, rock and roll happened. And I was like, wait a minute, this is a whole new thing. And I was old enough to actually understand that it was something new and revolutionary. So that was the impetus for me to say, wait a minute, people need to know that pop music didn't start with rock and roll. And so that was part of the Arkansas project. It really took on a much wider scope.
Boy, this is fantastic research. And what I love is that you're really utilizing this, we call it, it's not really downtime because you're not doing anything down. This is uptime for you.
No, it's not down.
You are moving forward this agenda of what you're doing. What's inspiring you as far as, are you doing any writing? Are you doing any research for writing for yourself to write?
Funny you should ask. Um, I have written more songs in the past 3 weeks than I've written in the past 3 years. I am not kidding. Once I settled in and began to absorb this idea that I wasn't going anywhere, because my backpack is packed. It's always packed. It sits right next to my bureau, next to my bedside table. If I had to get on a plane, literally all I have to do is grab it and go. It's the first time I've emptied it out and put it away in I don't know how long. So once I settled into this concept that I wasn't going anywhere, I fixed up my little home recording studio and tweaked up with some extra mics and got my little MIDI keyboard out and hooked everything up, which, I hadn't really played with very much. And I started writing and I started coming up with some cool stuff. And a lot of it, I have to say, it was inspired by being at home and being isolated. I have a song called Makeshift Paradise that I wrote just recently. And I actually sent it to Daryl. And I said, man, check out this song. And he was like, man, I love this. And so we're starting to talk about doing a Hall & Oates album. And all of a sudden, the ideas are starting to flow. And this isolation thing has really, for me, has really given me an opportunity to examine some things and start writing again.
Boy, I love the fact that you're seeing this inspiration and even talking to Daryl and kind of, keeping the momentum going, that you're really preparing yourself that when we do get back into action with this new normal that will happen,
yes,
you're going to hit the ground running.
We're going to hit the ground running in a lot of respects. We're going to get back on the road. That's one thing. Playing live is so important. And I know the fans want to hear live music. So we've got shows still on the books for July. Now, whether that happens or not is a day-to-day thing. And we're fingers crossed on that. But we'll push back as we need and we'll get to it eventually. But in the meantime, I hope to develop some songs and that will take me to another place and, keep on moving forward.
Boy, if you can, talk about a little bit of the writing process, because, musicians that listen to this are so intrigued by, first of all, they're fans of yours, and they're also intrigued by just your ability to be able to write. I mean, you're a prolific writer in what you've put together in the past, and you're continuing in this. What's that process like?
Well, going back to the Arkansas album that I was talking about, because I was in this world of research, retro, historic American music, traditional American music, I really wasn't writing in a contemporary style. I was thinking about that, and I was trying to adapt these older styles to something that was a little bit more, in my wheelhouse today.
Yeah.
Once I finished that, I thought to myself, I get asked all the time, especially by young musicians and young songwriters, where do you get your inspiration or where should you look? And I always say, emulate your heroes. Listen to the people you love. Try to copy them. Try to play a song by one of your musical heroes. Try to understand what it is that they do that you like. What it is that how they impose their melody over chords. I mean, there's only a certain amount of chords. There's only a few notes, but it's the peculiar and unique point of view and musical point of view to say this melody over these changes. These changes lead to these changes. And what appeals to me about that by my musical heroes. So because I would always impart that information, I said, maybe I should listen to myself. So I went back and started listening to things that I hadn't heard in years. One thing in particular was Joni Mitchell. For me, she sets the bar. Yeah. She sets the bar as the ultimate artistic singer-songwriter who, especially at her, in her finest moments, had no boundaries. It seemed that poetry and her unique musicality could stretch and warp and morph into this totally unique thing that only she was able to do. And I thought, if I'm going to listen to my own advice, why not, listen to the best? So I absorbed the entire Joni Mitchell Blue album again and again.
Beautiful album.
Well, I think it's one of the best albums ever made. I think it's perfect recording on every level, from the technical side of Henry Louis' engineering to her performance, to her lyrics, her music. Even the album cover is perfect. Everything about it is perfect.
And even the musicians that she put around herself, she brought some real serious a variety of musicians that she would use.
Eclectic, a collection of jazzers, like the Larry Carltons and Jaco Pastorius and things like that later on in her career. But for me, there was something about the Blue album that was so honest, so real, and so heart on her sleeve that I wanted to get to that. I wanted to get to my version of that, whatever that might be. I didn't know what that would be. I don't know if I could even achieve it, but that's where I set the bar. And so after having done that, I just began to play and things started happening. So I would say, thank you, Joni Mitchell. I would say, thank you, the musical muses, and good stuff started happening. And I felt released from the conventions of old Hall & Oates songs, the conventions of old blues and traditional music. I just felt like I could just try to do anything I wanted and see what happened. And so it worked out pretty well. I wrote a lot of songs, and I'm very proud of some of them. So,
what's amazing is this creative side that you have, that you're really opening up that, and as you always have, but now you're even taking it to a whole nother. Listen, the bar that you've raised is almost unreachable because from the normal person, because you have always set an extremely high bar at what you did and what you currently do. So but you're balancing now this creative side with now this business side by understanding the social media end of it, which is to get the word out. So how do you balance the creative and the business side just in your average day?
Well, it gets in my creative way, I want to tell you right now. But I'm very fortunate because my wife has taken on the responsibility of a lot of my social media, and she's really good at it, and she's very creative. So that's really helped me. But I also have a great team in marketing and PR, and they're there for me when I want to try to do something, and I'm either too distracted or I don't want to devote that much time to it because I realize the importance of it, but I don't want to get bogged down in it either.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important aspect for me to have that team to help me bring all this stuff out.
Boy, so you put together a team of people that have understanding of those areas, and you are like any CEO of an organization. You're allowing them to do their responsibility while that gives you the freedom of creativity to keep producing the product of who John Oates is.
You're exactly right. Surround yourself with great talent and delegate and hopefully just supervise. And with that, and try not to get in the way. But that's the exact same thing that I do in the recording studio. And I learned that lesson many years ago when Daryl and I first began recording, and we were being produced by Arif Mardin, the great Arif Mardin. I run my sessions in Nashville exactly the way he ran our Abandoned Luncheonette sessions. He set the bar, and he's a template for me. He surrounded Daryl and I with the greatest musicians in New York at that time. Bernard Purdy on drums. And we had Joe Farrell playing sax. We had Ralph McDonald playing percussion. The list goes on and on, some of the greatest players. And allowed Daryl and I to have these songs that could then blossom in this creative environment. Well, that's what I do here in Nashville. Vince Gill, who's become a friend over the years, he and I did a session together, and he told me, one thing he told me early on, which really hit home. He said, when you're in Nashville and you're producing, he said, you're the director of a movie. He says, there's 100 great guitar players. There's, maybe 12 good bass players. I'm just kidding. Sorry, I couldn't resist. You guys are going to hate me. But he said, you cast your recording session the way a director would cast the characters of a movie. Yeah. Who's the right guitar player? Who's the perfect keyboard player, the perfect pedal steel player, or the perfect bass player, whatever, for that moment, for that song, for that artist. Right. And so when you assemble this group of talent in the room, you just let it happen. You let it happen, but you guide it. Sure, if you really have something you want, you make it known. But let them bring something. And what are they going to bring that, and allow it to happen? I think it's the beautiful thing about being in a musical environment where you have these resources, incredibly rich resources.
So let's go back for a second. You talked about being a history buff. So are you able to pull from history inspiration that you then use with your music?
Well, yes, because, first of all, when it comes to producing, arranging, and writing, of course, here again, I have this incredibly great point of view because, as I said, I understood and was aware of music prior to rock and roll. Yeah. So this is your set of textbooks. Keep opening them up. And there's the early days of rock, and there's traditional, and there's the Delta blues, and it came up the river and turned into Stax and Bolt in Memphis. And all of a sudden it's in Chicago, and it's urban, you know, Chicago blues. And then it's regional rock and roll radio stations that are, you know, New York doesn't sound like Philadelphia, and Philadelphia doesn't sound like Motown, and Memphis doesn't sound like LA. And, you know, and then you just bring it all together. And that's what I can draw from. And I'm privileged to be able to draw from that.
You know, it was a very different time when we were younger in how music was presented to us. And like I said, there really was clarity and difference of certain areas. It's not so much that way now. So going back to doing that research and just being aware of it, I'm sure has got to be a very, very big part of your personal inspiration, which then opens up your creativity.
Absolutely. It was the regionalism of American music that was so exciting and so unique that has now, you know, been homogenized and, you know, kind of, it's like the small towns that had the mom and pop stores, and then they built the mall.
Yeah.
You know, not casting any kind of dispersions on whether that's good or bad, but there was a time when it was so amazing to be able to know that Steve Cropper and Duck Dunn and those guys, the music, the tracks that they were making, the vibe that they were pulling from was so personal and so uniquely personalized from that region and that time. And then, you know, what Berry Gordy and Smokey Robinson and the great session players and artists that were doing out of Motown. And then, you know, just that was so exciting to me. And even the great music that came out of the Wrecking Crew in California, you know, the fact that they were making these amazing records, and they were all, a lot of them were jazz players because they didn't think of music in compartmentalized. They thought of music in pure musical forms, but they were able to bring that skill and that sensibility to these pop songs. And what made them so unique. And you know, so this is exciting stuff, and it's American music. And not to you know, to belittle anything that came out of England or Europe or anything like that, but a lot of the early English rock and roll was really trying to copy what they were hearing in America. And I'm very proud of being part of an American music tradition. I think, you know, personally, it's probably the greatest export that America has ever had culturally to the rest of the world. There's no downside to it. There's no negativity in any way, shape, or form. We've given the world a style, a sound, a sensibility, a look, a feel that is uniquely American and represents what America is all about.
Boy, John, this is so well said. You know, this artist series at a distance is us trying to connect with people during this pandemic time. And you are right in the thick of trying to push yourself to a higher level. You know, the sessions panel, as we have on our YouTube channel, is really about going into further depth with this. So when we get a chance to get down to Nashville, I want to sit down with you and do a much longer version of this so we can have that kind of quality time to really open up, because you are a library of knowledge and you've always been this way, going back to the early recordings to what you're doing right now. You've always had a chance of allowing yourself as an artist to change and adapt to what's happening now. That's pretty powerful.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's a compliment that I really do appreciate, because I like to feel that, you know, I'm just here to absorb what's around me and translate it through my own prism in whatever way I can. Well,
that prism is sending some beautiful colors out. That's inspiring people. That's opening up eyes. The bar that you have set is so exciting to see how far you're pushing yourself. And with all of that, John, I got to thank you so much for being a part of the artist series at a distance. You are fantastic. Keep it up. Good luck. And I hope someday to see you real soon.
Dom, we're finished? I thought we were just getting started. Oh, come on, man. All right. Well, you come on down to Nashville. We'll spend a little more time.
This is fantastic. Thank you so much, John.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
Bye-bye. Dom Famularo here at the Sessions panel. This is so exciting. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Click the subscribe button to be a part of what we're doing. The views help us tremendously. All of your comments, we read them and react to them. This is incredible. The support you're giving us is great. The Sessions panel. We'll see you real soon.